Hey guys, Thomas the Solar Genie here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the seasons of 2 and 3 for Sonic Prime. If you end up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. Why don't I do it to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly, and fourth to my Discord server you can join, collab and chill and do all that cool stuff. And chilling will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into Sonic Prime. Now, for those of you who don't recall, I actually did review Season 1 already for Sonic Prime. I'll probably try to find the link in the description for that one down below, if you want to check that out. Now, this will be primarily seasonal spoilers for 2 and 3, primarily 3 more so than 2, as the shift / focus of the series, primarily in Season 3, focuses more on Sonic's issues with 9 and the ever-growing tension between them, that being 9 wanting to just have his own little place, be isolated, having his own little planet. However, he notices that the power source, the MacGuffin of this show, he needs a little bit something extra. He needs Sonic's essence, essentially. And thus, once he's recognized that, he wants to utilize Sonic yet again. And Sonic, still wanting to establish that all of the worlds can be saved, separated, and pretty much fixed to be as they were. Thus, the two duke it out physically, well, primarily toward the end, whereas 9 primarily engages in beforehand using a bunch of Metal Sonic / Metal variants of the other characters as well, using more and more of the power source of this crystal, that this prism, as it were. And with the world's various areas being placed in high enough threat, even the Dr. Eggman variants all decide to team up, all in unison with Sonic's team of all of their variants, all collaborating in a one unified effort alongside Shadow as well, to essentially even the odds, as 9 rather has increased his army by an incredible fold. Thus, they have to strategize, try to just talk it out through a few times. And with each one, Sonic seems to brim with some little fracture, a little piece that 9 gets away thinking, like, maybe something's off here, or after every defeat, he feels more and more threatened that his world, or more irritated that his world isn't complete, that this little sanctuary he's building for himself is just not enough. And what I really like about this is that 9 is a really well thought out antagonist. Even as early as Season 1, you can definitely start to see some of those earlier threads of where 9 is going to go. His backstory elicits that much detail in how much, separation is between him and, say, his original counterpart, that being Tails. But with that, it is rather creative that these pieces are all put in place, and we see all of these variant battles taking place, where we see all the variant versions of the characters, whether that be of the woodland versions, the pirate versions, or the rebel versions of each character, all taking part in this overwhelming battle near the end. And despite all of it, it's still, there's so much chaos and so much of that going on the outside, and yet, at the end of it all, it was still Sonic seeing what was happening to this world and looking at Nine's expression throughout the battle and seeing that level of desperation or even a hint of sadness, or whether it be any of those in-between thoughts, is Sonic being able to pick up on that and have everyone else halt when it came to that, and trying to find that alternative, trying to say, we can restore these worlds back to this way that it was, even your world as it is. And sure enough, Sonic allows himself to be that power source near the end, and it's pretty much a near sacrifice of the main character, as once he is done doing that, he's pretty much almost a hollow version of himself, almost like barely seeping with any energy, and then it is up to all of his allies that still remain, that before being, obviously when they get near the crystals, the Eggmans do their deceit or their backstab. It fails, obviously, and all that stuff is all fun and good and extra. But at the end of the day, it's a bunch of characters bringing Sonic back, and then them all going to their own worlds. And presumably, we don't see it, but presumably Nine just remains on that planet as it was, with not much else of it being fully realized, perhaps. And Sonic coming back to the original version of his world and having no time to essentially relay the amount of craziness that has happened to his group. They just see him behaving much differently than he was at the beginning of the show, and that being carried through from it's almost as if virtually nothing happened when the prism is returned. Rather, Sonic knows all of the things he's been through, and only he knows, and he's put back just far enough where he can save the crystal from being reshattered, and does so by tackling Eggman instead of the stone itself, and then having Shadow move the prism somewhere else. We don't know where he sent it, via using Chaos Control. And just before Sonic can reveal his little backstory of everything that is encountered, it's likely, we don't actually see him, but it's likely another Eggman attack, or someone rather. And that was Sonic Prime. So yeah, I think that this definitely reminds me of when, in the Archie comic, of when Scourge, one of the best antagonists / villains of Sonic history, actually did get Tails and Sonic to fight the original Tails, that being not an alternate version of Tails. So you knew that that was Tails and Sonic fighting. I do feel like there's a level of obfuscation here, that being it's a version of Tails that has gone through essentially a different backstory, so it might as well be a different character, essentially. And yeah, it really does speak to that whole your sort of life experience dictates these sorts of things, of who you become, essentially, is through those events, because the difference between Tails and Nine is as different as the sun is to the moon, essentially. None necessarily evil, but in mythology, the moon is often thought as the dark thing, the unknown, the mysterious, the evil, as it were. But obviously, that's not the case. But here we are. Nonetheless, I do think that Nine is a really great antagonist. It still is a shame that they couldn't do anything with Scourge due to obvious copyright nonsense, because this is like would be the series to do that in. I would feel like most it would be prevalent. Another version of Sonic would be Scourge, literally. I mean, that kind of is his backstory, kind of. I mean, there's a slight altercation, I think. It's been a while since I've seen the origin of Scourge, so I might be misremembering it a little bit. But he did look exactly like Sonic at a point, and it was only until he touched the Master Emerald, after fighting Knuckles' and sibling person. I don't remember who he fought from Knuckles' tribe. Some echidna. After doing that and touching the emerald, he permanently turned green, and then got the blue eyes, and then his super form being purple. But it was really cool to see how far Scourge had gotten in comparison to, say, someone like Nine. We actually see the accomplishment of Scourge, and this is something I said, I don't remember what video it was, but I'll say it again. It's why Scourge is definitely one of my favorite antagonists of all times. He actually accomplishes his goal. Like, he actually becomes king of his planet, or a version of it anyway. Like, and that's what he set out to do. Like, there are only a literal handful full of villains that have a set-up goal and then accomplish their goal. Like, you could probably count them on one hand, very likely, if not stopped by the hero of said story. But then again, that's probably because there are a pretty decent selection of villains who want to take over the entire world or whatever. Their goals are very over the what you would want a villain to accomplish. But yeah, it is really cool to see what would happen if it was temporary, having a villain accomplish that goal. And Nine, there is this, and it makes it just as interesting, is that it almost feels like he doesn't quite get what he wants, and you see that pain. And there is a because I keep using the word antagonist, I wouldn't place him obviously as a pure villain, obviously, and that level of distinction is that he just kind of wants to be left alone, and that's a pretty straightforward thing, a pretty simple thing. And the world that he happens to inhabit that allows him to do so, unfortunately, almost requires that sort of, but could have had that sacrifice be, Sonic's life. And even a part of that, there was even a part of that where Nine was like, but I kind of want to have him there, though. It almost seems as if he wanted to accomplish it without having to rely on Sonic. Almost to be like, I can prove to you, Sonic, that this world can belong to almost me and you. That sort of seems to be like what he was hinting at, and what you even see especially near the end, where you see even Sonic be surprised that he, in this little base, that he's left this little area that seems to be designated for Sonic, or seems to be how Sonic sees it. But that's still even rather fascinating, again, from Nine's perspective. Again, it does allude to this sort of wanting him to be there, wanting him to see it, but after the fact. Almost like he wanted to be, have him there just to say, I told you I could do this. And, we can really recreate the world. And this kind of goes in line with the general intelligence of the character, that being Nine/Tails in this case, he being the genius of the group. And that resonating with all the other parts of his loner backstory in the case of 9, and seeing how that comes into constant struggle against what Sonic is trying to do. So yeah, it really is solid. Again, I would highly recommend this. And I think what's really cool about it is that I don't think you necessarily have to know that much about Sonic to come into this series, though there are plenty of references into the classic games, and it's almost harder to say how could you not know Sonic at this point, as you know, as popularized as he is in the gaming community at the very least. You know, it is a sufficient way to say that I think that this series is a really prime example, pun intended I suppose, of a show that is really well written. And it has plenty of action to support it as well. I think that does take the backdrop to the storytelling here, but it is high-octane action, particularly in the 3rd season. There's a lot of fighting. There's like action happening in each episode, but there's still, the core of it still hits pretty, it's still hitting that harder thing of what, you know, what these characters are trying to accomplish. What do they want? Going back to really fundamentally understanding what makes a story so strong with its characters, treating them like the building blocks to your story. And that's really what this show does. And it does have a little fun with the alternatives. You know, I think they could have gone even harder, obviously. I mean, I've said my piece about Scourge already, but I mean, really, I would double down on that too, seeing how this particular season ends, with it being pretty open-ended about, like, is there going to be a season 4? I don't know. I mean, they pretty much have all the worlds go back to the way they were, so it could end here, by all means, and it could have a season 4. And again, I think the best thing to do with season 4, unironically, at that point, would be to bring in King Scourge. Like, yes, and I said King Scourge, actually bring him back and retell his story in a show like this. Actually have him come in. Actually have him, you know, do the same things he did in the comic book to Tails and Sonic. And then you can see it all happen all over again in show format, and actually have Scourge accomplish his goal. I think that's plenty of episodes worth of content. And to even further expand upon that, because I know that Scourge has his own world too, again, kind of alluding to what Sonic Prime is all about, there's like another version of Tails, I'm pretty sure. And you know what? I think it would be pretty neat for in season 4 for 9. I don't know how they would go about doing this, since all the things separated again, or all the worlds separated again, but perhaps someone else can come fumbling into the world outside of Sonic, and having them be the catalyst this time around. I mean, there are plenty of characters in the Sonic world to choose from. Silver, Blaze, any of those characters can just be the catalyst, in terms of, like, they're the ones who are unlocking all this world stuff to happen. And through that, we now have opportunities where we can have 9, for example, meet Tails, and now 9 can finally see what Sonic was talking about all that time. I would really think that that would be really solid. And what does 9 think about that version of Tails that is so, you know, idealized? You know, Tails is essentially Sonic's brother at this point. I think that is a pretty hard and hitting, like, thing at this point, this far into their livelihoods, and how long they've just been together in terms of their history. So yeah, I think that interaction between any of the, you know, characters meeting themselves, which we do see plenty of within Sonic Prime, I think that one example would be the one I would want to see the most, because it is the most extreme out of any of the other swaps of characters we have, is, again, having 9 meet Tails in this instance, and seeing how far their characters, again, are, and how far, how relative they are to Sonic in different ways. So all of that is so much potential. So I'm really rooting for Sonic Prime to get a Season 4. I kind of hope it does, and obviously I'm over here still desiring Scourge. And maybe it's because I also secretly always wanted to voice act for King Scourge simultaneously. I mean, I would imagine that he probably wouldn't sound too far from Sonic, so he'd probably have a very cocky-ish sort of attitude to his voice. Sonic's voice isn't too hard for me to do alone. It's sort of up here. That's no good. That sort of thing. Obviously, Sonic Prime has his own. Sonic has his own little voice actor here already established, so I think it'd be neat to have a slight altercation between him and Scourge. It's just wish fulfillment on my end, I guess. Foolish thinking, maybe, perhaps, that I could, and having that cockiness mixed in with a bit of confidence / demented is what I think Scourge would have to land on. So there would be a little bit of deepness when he'd become Scourge, so it'd probably be like around here, like, get on your knees. It probably wouldn't be too distinct from my normal speaking voice, like right here. Like, again, just a slight altercation, like, get on your knees. And that's something Scourge says in the comic, or I'm paraphrasing, but, yeah. So that's all wish fulfillment, but what do I think of, what score would I give Sonic Prime, getting back to the task at hand? I would highly, highly recommend it. I'd give this season a 9 out of 10. Obviously, there's like that little bit missing for me. I think they could have played around again with the worlds a little bit more, obviously, as I'm asking for that. So I do think that is what's the core thing that is missing from making Sonic Prime that perfect 10 out of 10. But hey, that's still really solid, so that's a high recommendation still from me. So if you ended up enjoying my full review for Sonic Prime, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. I want to head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Click it there to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly, or to my Discord server you can join, collab, chill, do all that cool stuff. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye!